Great.
Okay, we're recording.
Well, welcome to the HAB November meeting. I'm delighted to see you all here. I will call the meeting to order and we'll do a roll call. So I believe, let's start with Juliet.
Here.
Terry Pamos. Not here yet. Jen.
Here.
Jennifer is here. Let's see. Danny. No Danny yet. Oh, there's Terry. Terry, you're here, so say here.
Sure, I'm in.
Okay, good. Okay, I believe we have a quorum and we can proceed. Let's find the agenda. So tonight we'll be going through the agenda review. That's item number 2 here. Approve the minutes from October. We'll have public participation with 2 members of the public present. And then we have a really very interesting presentation on the East Boulder sub-community plan. To giving that a good hour. It's an important subject and we have 2 staff members here to present that. And then matters from the board, we'll be reviewing a mobile ADU white paper draft, primarily prepared by Jacques. A letter to council that's due December 15th, and we'll talk about next steps on middle income strategies and potential recommendations. That is determined at our retreat to be a top priority for this board in 2022. We will set our December meeting as item number 7, a debrief, and hope to be done by 9 o'clock. Any questions? Great. Do I have a motion to approve the October 27th minutes? Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. So approved. We're up to public participation. And I believe we have Mark, is that the right name, up first? Might be muted.
Okay, you're able to hear me now?
Yes, Mark Fuhrer, great to see you. You have 3 minutes. I look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Okay, well, thanks for doing this. And I just stumbled on your committee's existence. I had no idea there was an HAB, and I'm really glad you exist. I think it's very much a group that's needed. And in fact, a group I belonged to almost 40 years ago proposed that this group exists, even though it wasn't called this. We called for something called the Community Housing Panel back in the 80s. At that time, I was the director of the Boulder Tenants Union. And this was one of many proposals we had made to the city council at that time that unfortunately wasn't taken up until apparently just recently. We had proposed that this community housing panel would deal with, amongst other things, affordable housing and, as you might guess, tenant-landlord issues. Since I just stumbled on your website and group, I've been looking at your mission and your responsibilities to better understand what you all are doing. And at least as Michael knows, I've spoken with Jay about an hour and a half ago, 2 hours ago, so I could get more information about you all. My initial motivation for contacting you all is the recent and somewhat divisive local election. My observation is that it further revealed a growing divide within our community on housing and where it should physically go or not go, who should build it, such as CU, and who should be occupying it concerning the occupancy registration restrictions. But regardless of which side people were on, there seemed to be a strong consensus that we have an affordable housing crisis and Boulder needs affordable housing. And I make that observation based on a huge number of remarks on Nextdoor and, of course, letters to the editor and guest editorials in papers. Combined with the national and statewide affordable housing crisis, obviously Boulder is hardly unique, and the pandemic skyrocketing housing prices, it feels like this is one of the best opportunities I have ever seen to significantly address affordable housing and have a lot more public support for it than I've seen in the past. As of course you all know, Boulder is the undisputed leader in creating affordable housing. But even with a goal of if we get to 15%, we're only halfway there. There's really no way to build our way out of this crisis.
Excuse me, Mark, I'm
Yes.
afraid your time is expired, but do you have a summary comment you'd like to make or pose a question?
Yeah, I didn't realize I'd taken that long. All right, so what I'm really here to do is I want the issue of rent control to be considered by the HAB. Our group, Boulder Tenants Union, brought this issue up almost 40 years ago. We were the ones, unfortunately, who triggered this horrible ban on rent control statewide. I have a lot more to say about that, but it is one of the biggest impacts on affordable housing that the city can do, and I would like to see some serious discussion. And as I said, I have more to say about it, but my time is up, so I'm going to leave it there for the moment.
Okay, well, feel free to comment over the email or come back next month and add on to those comments. I personally am aware of that issue and some potential progress on it, and it's certainly a good topic for the board. So thank you for that comment. And I believe we have Lynn Siegel up next.
You need videos, and don't tell me it's not your responsibility. You're catching hell from the public. This is not okay. I need to know who I'm dealing with here. I need to know who Mark, I know Mark from 30 years ago, but I don't know because I can't see him. I've got some image up there that says ancestral something. I don't know what that means. I don't know if he's a staffer, if he's City of Boulder.
Lynn,
There needs to be.
I'm sorry. I really wish you'd stick to the issue and not attack the other speaker.
I'm not attacking him.
Well, don't make it
Not
personal.
understand, Michael.
Don't-
You
don't
and I
make it
disagree
personal,
on just,
then.
you
Please.
and I disagree on
give
just
him an
about
issue.
everything, Michael, but I am not attacking Mark. He's a friend of mine.
Well, then
the
you know
fact
who
that
it
you
is, but please.
That is
if you
stunning to me, that you have no business making that assumption. You don't know anything about me and Mark Ferrer, and if it's the same person even, but I wouldn't know, would I? Because there's no video. That's not okay. Not okay. Do you people understand that? Absolutely not. This could go on for decades of this virus, and we need to see each other and know who we are. Now, we can't build our way out of it. It's like Mark said. So forget East Boulder Working Group. Apple at $1,000 a square foot on commercial. You think that's going to help? Michael, is that going to help? I don't think so. This housing advisory board is a farce. A farce. The first thing you need to do is say land disposal. Refuse the land disposal for CU South. That's the starter to help make things. Well, you're not going to improve affordability in Boulder, but you're going to stabilize affordability in Boulder. And you're not going to do that by building East Boulder into a huge another city. And you're not going to do that by building a city at CU South on a floodplain. It's not going to happen. You shouldn't be doing that. You should be doing everything you can to see that the land disposal is not approved. I've fought for open space. I've paid for it, and I'm not giving it up to build a bunch of stuff on a floodplain in South Boulder. So CU can expand. We need to cap enrollment. You know what the Millennium Harvest House is? 295 student housing units there with a 4th story for 3 feet because they're on the floodplain. This is outrageous, high and every corner you turn. At Folsom and Spruce, up in North Broadway, there's no way you're gonna begin to even touch affordability in this town. You need to stop already. Do you hear me? Stop building. And you can't do it yourself. Pass it on to the planning board and the council. Stop overbuilding this community. It's a small town. It's not friggin' New York City. Stop.
Your comments are duly noted. I'm afraid you're out of time. Okay, we are into our main presentation. Welcome Jean Gatta and Jean Sanson. We will be hearing a presentation on the East Boulder Sub-Community Plan. So I think you can go right into it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michael. As you said, Jean and I are here to give you an update about what we're calling our 60% draft of the sub-community plan. We were last here and discussed scenarios and recommendations with this board last March, and y'all had some really great feedback at that time for us that have been included and have helped shape where we are with this draft. I'm going to go ahead and share screen. And get this going on. Come on. All right, how's that? Looks good. Very good. So you all received a memo with an overview of our recommendations and many links back to the materials that we have available on the project website. And we've been sharing with community members over the past few weeks to get feedback. We do have a few questions for the board that are really around your level of support for the approach and the recommendations in this draft plan, and also to give us very feedback. At this point, we're really seeking very actionable feedback to make changes and to that draft plan to flesh it out and get to that 90% draft early next year. Just as a reminder, quick refresher where the boundaries are for the East Boulder Subcommunity Plan, and reminder that I know currently there are a few approved housing units within the subcommunity, but really the only existing housing is the San Lazaro Mobile Home Park that's just adjacent to the city limits, but in our area too. As I mentioned, as you know, because we've been able to have to share updates with this board periodically through the life of this project. Our last time was in this middle orange time in March, and now we are in the implementation planning phase with community engagement going on right now, with an intention that we would love to get a plan adopted in the first quarter of next year. What we're calling our 60% draft, or really the big ideas, the big moves, includes the description of the vision, a land use plan, connections plan. And as I also mentioned, the feedback at this point will help us refine to the final plan and really help flesh out that implementation strategy. As you know, we had a robust engagement window earlier this year, and then also these past few weeks, we held a series of open houses for nearby residents, property owners, business owners, and then also a community event on Monday that was really interesting. Some small breakout groups. We have a questionnaire up on Be Heard Boulder with a lot of information in it currently, and we're looking to probably close that window in the next week or so. Again, you all had an update earlier this year about the general areas of change and the intentions around mixed use. and saw some of we were able to share our feedback at that point, at that time too, of a lot of the communication from the community were to focus on select areas, changing to mixed use, but with a lot of interest in ways to provide housing in this area that is really compatible with, in the areas where it's compatible with the industrial uses, to make sure that we're continuing to keep the opportunities for business, for our local businesses and these thriving industrial areas. So getting to that vision of the subcommunity evolving into a place that really is integrated, working industrial spaces, but emphasizing the direction that we have in our comp plan around 15-minute neighborhoods, a better diversity of uses, and ways to address our critical need for housing. We've honed into the areas of change to these yellow ones that you see on the map. The primary place, especially for housing, for the inclusion of new housing, is that 55th and Arapahoe station area that you see as number 1. The 2 neighborhoods that we're calling Valmont Parksides, both east and west, some good opportunities for housing in those areas as well. And then with the Flatiron Business Park, really emphasizing there at this point a few sites for potential housing along 55th, but the rest of the Flatiron Park really focusing more on changes that would round out that mix of uses, adding commercial, especially walkability, so folks don't have to be in their cars all of the time. Okay, with that, and we talked about this, and this board had a lot of interesting comments. I was looking back through the notes today. It was I remember it being a very good conversation around really looking to find unit types, defines, look for the examples in other places that are doing innovative mixed use to be able to successfully incorporate housing into some of these industrial areas. Again, not focusing on all of the areas, especially those that have somewhat more messy or impactful general industrial types of uses. But, looking back, some of this board's comments about some of the office or other uses where there are pretty large parking lots. Jean will describe some of the mobility improvements and recommendations that may help us be able to really think about how we might differently use parking areas. You all talked a lot about who would be living in these units, and we want to do more assessment and conversation around the range of incomes that are of folks that are working in the area, and being able to make sure that we have a range of housing types and affordability levels in the ways that we have to try to guide that. Let's see. Okay, moving on. A little bit more about each of these area change we'll just touch on briefly. The 55th and Arapahoe station area, this area that you see in yellow, is that neighborhood transit-oriented development. So we're really working to define these areas and the future development to take advantage of the coming bus rapid transit and the mobility improvements that will be in the area because of that. So really in the yellow and the orange areas that are the places for the neighborhood TOD and the innovation TOD in the orange that would have some more residential opportunities. These next series of slides are some images that our consultant for the station area, our MIG, have put together that help illustrate the coming improvements and some of the potential building styles and types that we might be able to see. On this one, this will be looking across the intersection at 55th and Arapahoe, where you see some of the various amenities of that station area. And this one is looking north on 55th. With some amenity improvements. And then I think this one's over here in, I believe it's Conestoga. So really illustrating that mix of uses and more vibrant type of public realm recommendations that are included in the plan. The Valmont Park East and West neighborhoods, we, as you're seeing, these range of different place types is what we're calling. It's that little step between Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan land use and zoning that helps inform those types of uses. A lot of the feedback we were hoping for right now is to help guide how we flesh this out and really what what the type of character we're going to be recommending in these areas. So you'll see the green is really thinking about a more housing forward that takes advantage of fronting on the park. And then, okay, that jumped. Again, and with Valmont Park, similarly, the green right here on 55th and this sort of orange color, the areas identified for opportunities for housing. And with that, I will turn it over to Jean Sanson because she has some really great information about the mobility improvements and connections plan that will really help support this changes for housing and mixed use in these areas.
Great, thank you, Jean. So for those of you I don't know, my name is Jean Sanson, and I'm with the city's Department of Transportation and Mobility. And I've been working closely with Jean and the whole project team on the East Boulder Sub-Community Plan. And I want to thank you for having us this evening. First, can everyone hear me? I should have asked. Okay, great. Good. So I'm going to switch gears for a bit to talk about mobility and transportation in East Boulder. And I'm going to, if you could go back to that prior slide. Thank you. Thanks, Jean. So, these are just some photos of out in East Boulder today. And today, when we think about this area, we recognize that it was designed in a certain era where low density land uses were separated from each other. The automobile really governed how the streets were designed. And there are large swaths of parking lots that dominate the landscape, as Jean mentioned. And as a result, East Boulder today has long stretches of disconnected streets. It has limited walking and biking facilities as compared to other areas around town, and frankly, less transit service than other areas of Boulder. So, put simply, when you think about travel in East Boulder today, it's generally more convenient to travel by car. But the good news is that in the future, we think that travel in East Boulder will look quite different. The car obviously will continue to play a role in how people move around East Boulder, but it will be complemented by other options. So next slide, Jean. Thank you. Jean was talking about planned land uses in this area. When we think about how land uses in this part of town will change over time with more people living in the area and working and shopping and recreating, our transportation system needs to support this change. It needs to underpin it. And so what this plan is calling for is a finer grained network of streets and paths needed to support this more compact urban form and the mix of uses that we hope to see. And in some cases, you'll see with these dash lines, these could be entirely new streets and paths. And in other cases, they're going to be upgrades to existing streets and facilities. So some of these improvements that you see on the map are projects that we've had on the books as part of the city's transportation master plan, like the protected bike lanes along 55th Street. And Jean shared an illustrative image of what that could look like. Others are new projects that this plan will add to the transportation plan, like new street connections in that Park East and Park West neighborhood that we were just looking at. Next slide, Jean. So the plan also is looking to create places where a variety of transportation options are centrally located, and we call these mobility hubs. So throughout the East Boulder sub-community, we'll locate a network of mobility hubs that will be strategically placed to offer access to things like shared electric scooters and bikes, which you're starting to see out there today, things like Lyft and Uber pickup and drop off areas, car share, and robust local and regional transit service. And these hubs are designed to be distributed throughout East Boulder, located at places like key intersections, at bus stops, and either within or next to buildings, parking garages, and public spaces. So yeah, next slide, Jean, thank you. So the city's making a number of investments to upgrade the transportation system today. You'll see lots of these orange cones. I'm sure they're familiar to you. We see them all over town. We do things like fill in missing links in the sidewalk and pass system. And we're doing things like piloting shared electric scooters and bicycles, as I mentioned. But we're also looking to make a number of larger upgrades in the East Boulder area in the future. And we call these the big moves. Next slide, please. So what you're looking at here is one of the most transformative of these moves. It's the redesign of East Arapahoe, which is one of our city's busiest travel corridors, into a complete street with better travel options for commuters and the more people who are going to be living and working in East Boulder in the future. So just real quickly, a cornerstone of this investment will be high frequency, high quality bus rapid transit service connecting Boulder to communities out east all the way out to I-25. It will include repurposing outside travel lanes for business and for business access and regional and local traffic. It will, or right turns, I should say. It will also continue to include two general purpose traffic lanes in each direction, raised protected bike lanes, and enhancements to the streetscape and public realm. And these improvements are going to be paired with enhanced local transit service into East Boulder, either via the extension of the high frequency hop bus service, which currently serves Central Boulder. And it could look like a fixed route extension into East Boulder, or it could look like something that's more of a flexible micro transit type of service where travelers use their smartphones to match trip requests in real time with flexible routes through the area, kind of like a Uber, Lyft bus type system, similar to using types of ride hailing services. So next slide. Just to wrap things up, what we're really looking to do is create an opportunity for more safe and walkable areas where people can easily travel by bike, foot, scooter, high frequency transit, car, and vehicles. I mean, we recognize that this is a very industrial area and we'd like to continue to maintain a lot of the industry and business out there. So ensuring that goods movement, delivery, and freight traffic can easily and comfortably and safely navigate through East Boulder is important to us. So at the end of the day, we want to allow for that movement as well as to provide convenient and reliable travel options for the planned mix of new employees and residents and visitors to the area. So with that, I will hand it back to Jean.
Thanks, Jean. Yep, just to recap, really these big ideas building on what we've seen earlier as the plan has progressed around a better mix of uses to foster those 15-minute walkable mixed use neighborhoods, more housing of different types, better ways to get around without a car, and lots of areas generally staying the same that provide our really important medical and other services. As I mentioned, we've had a number of engagement opportunities over the past few weeks, really aimed at understanding people's level of support for these, what we're calling at those 60% draft, the big rocks in the jar, and we'll be filling in lots of the little rocks as we move along. And I think that's it. We'd love to take your questions and hear your feedback. The discussion questions that we have are around your level of support for these approaches and the locations for new housing and mixed use, and specifically that 55th and Arapahoe Station area. Feedback on the balance of uses, how we might further refine that, and if there are other changes that you might recommend where those would be. Great.
Thank you. Thank you, Jean and Jean. And our newest member, Jen Livovich, has raised her hand first to respond to some of your questions. Oh, I'm sorry, you're muted, Jen.
Sorry about that. Thank you for presenting. And I know this is in light stage, right? You would refer to this as sort of brainstorming. Is that where we're at here with this?
No, I would say not.
Planning. Okay.
As I mentioned, we're about 2 years into this process. We have, and Jen, welcome to the board. It's nice to meet you.
Hey, nice to meet you.
I didn't do a lot of the other background because
okay.
the rest of the board members have had a series of updates prior, but we have had, we've been at this about 2 years. We have a community working group, about 20 members that have been, just troopers and hanging in there and helping us advise on all of these pieces. We've done several engagement windows and focus groups, virtual meetings, questionnaires that have helped shape to where we are. We've been to with our planning board, and hello, Lupita. Lupita's seen several versions of this as a planning board member along the way, and our city council. So our most recent visit was with the Transportation Advisory Board and the Planning Board, and then also the City Council in a separate meeting in July to share these recommendations. Those boards really gave us a green light for sharing these with the community, and council particularly really on board with where these recommendations are going, but recognizing that this was a really important time to get feedback from the community to help refine them.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure.
So I'm still going to ask a few questions.
Absolutely.
All right. So, Jean, you were talking about some of the different types of alternative transportation, what some of that could look like there. And so I saw a sign for Wi-Fi, like a Wi-Fi zone. And that's great, but I'm curious why we don't have Wi-Fi directly on our buses. And I was hoping, maybe this is off topic, but I think it also is relevant. And I didn't know if you could possibly answer that. And then the only 2 other points I was interested in making is, so if I look around Boulder and I look at different pockets of Boulder, I can see where, I hear a lot of conversation about increasing walkability. And so when I think of walkability, I think of new urbanism. And so if I look at North Boulder, I can see some aspects of new urbanism, but then I can also see where some of that has missed the mark. And so with this development here, I know you can't speak for other businesses, but what I would like to see is a diverse representation of staple retailing stores in the area. I think I talked to somebody about this with on the Housing Advisory Board about North Boulder. There's not really an economically friendly shopping option for people who might be in that LMI earning range. And so I just wanted to slide that in because even though that is down 55th in Arapahoe, I mean, their nearest stores, King Supers, that's beyond 10 minutes. And so when you want to increase walkability, you want to make everything walkable in less than 10 minutes. So I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Jen. Jean, I don't know whether you can answer that, the first question about the buses. I think, Jen, just recognizing your second, I don't know if it was a question or a comment, but the recommendations around adding retail, we think will help with the access to services. And we have heard a lot about wanting to encourage ways that new retail would be more affordable. And as you acknowledged, very hard to control.
And Jennifer, related to your question about Wi-Fi on buses, that's something we've been advocating for with RTD for many years, and they have yet to provide that. I will say we're working very hard to electrify our bus fleet, the hot bus fleet. And what I was thinking of when you asked that question is, do we need Wi-Fi on the hot bus, or why don't we have Wi-Fi on the hot bus? Because that's actually the one bus service in town that the city actually managed just via using VIA as our operator. So I'm happy to circle back and get an answer for you on that, because I don't know myself as to why we wouldn't have them on our own buses.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, there's a lot of conversation about equity and the digital divide, and I feel like if we want to encourage people to use our transportation systems, we should be meeting people a little bit more where they are and providing them, well, free Wi-Fi. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you, Jan. I'll add a very quick comment and we'll take more questions about the affordable retail in these types of neighborhoods. My experience is they require a subsidy. And a good example of that is what Denver Housing Authority is doing in their more recent mixed income neighborhoods, where they subsidize something called choice markets in Sun Valley and 10th and Osage. So it can be done, but it ain't easy, and the market might not take care of it. More questions? Comments? Stuff.
Mike, I'd like to comment, if that's okay.
Thank you, Terry. Take it away.
Thanks for the presentation again, follow up from the last one, which I think is great. Kind of working big to small, generally thinking, I think East Boulder is an area that is ripe for new housing. I think it's a great idea. A lot of what's out there is older and in need of redevelopment, but I think the real challenge is going to be from a property owner's perspective. If you have a building or a warehouse or whatever's out there, office, flex, all the different product types that are out there right now, if they're working, which most of them are, and more of them are working now better than ever, motivating those property owners to wholesale change their use, i.e., tear down the buildings and rebuild something else, or utilize their parking lots for housing, that's a tough thing to do, because a lot of times property owners, especially out there, now there's a lot of institutional owners and whatnot, if it's working and it's meeting their needs financially from a return on investment, all that kind of stuff, it's hard to get them to change. It's not impossible, but it's difficult. I think maybe a strategy to start change out there is to look at the areas that don't have buildings, don't have parking lots. I know there's some stuff around the park and whatnot, and really motivate those property owners to do something, really incentivize them to do something to at least get the ball rolling. I think would be a good strategy. But overall, I think putting housing in out there is great. I think that the neighborhood and the type of property that's out there and the type of housing that's going to go there maybe doesn't fit the kind of housing that we probably need the most, which is more middle income family housing. And that's probably not what's going to be out there, but at least it'll be something. And we need, as we know, we need more of everything. So even if it's more dense, even if it's more multifamily, even if it's more condos, it's still better than not. But I think that the challenge is going to be getting existing property owners that are doing fine to change their ways. But I like the idea, and I think it's great. Thank you for the presentation.
Thanks, Terry.
Thank you, Terry. Who would like to go next?
Michael, it looks like Danny and Jacques have hands up.
Oh, okay. That just popped on my screen. Danny, why don't you go first?
I'll cede the floor to Jacques.
There we go. Jacques, you might.
Thanks, Danny. I had to get to the technology instead of just the hand wave. I guess a couple of things. One, Gene, I kind of wanted to follow up on Terry's concern about getting property owners to, shift use basically with their properties if they have an existing use and already a structure on it. How much of that is really being proposed out here? Do you have a sense of that?
Well, as you know, these types of plans evolve over decades. We're still seeing a lot of the implementation of the North Boulder Subcommunity Plan. But I think we have to recognize that to get that, to do that motivation, we probably need to work in some incentives. Some of the things that have been discussed are around a little more FAR or some changes to the zoning that would help incentivize or motivate the renovation. We know that a lot of these buildings also are really aging, and so some of those opportunities will be coming in the next decade or so. Jean, other thoughts, especially around the station area? We have some recommendations within that plan too.
Yeah, I think you're right. And we recognize what a challenge this is. We were just having a conversation with our economic and market consultant who's helping us with the more detailed planning around the 55th and Arapahoe area. And, this is going to be a huge challenge, whether it's density bonuses, FAR bonuses, financial incentives. This is really the next part of this plan that we need to tackle to start defining what the direction will be to implement these policies. And we're also, and that's why we're having conversations with folks like you too, to understand what's palatable and what you would like to start seeing out there. Yeah, it's certainly a challenge.
If I can keep going, I had a couple other questions. One, Jean, Gatsa Jean, is that when we had a meeting earlier, one of the last updates you gave us, we talked about there was discussion about the kind of housing units versus kind of jobs balance in this area. Has that shifted from those original numbers? It seems like the 4,400 new units seems to me to be a different number than what we looked at before. I could be mistaken, but it struck me as being a higher number. And where are we at on that?
Yep, I think when the last time we were here, we had 3 different concepts, and some of them had a little more different types of housing in different areas. I think we were one of the upper range of some of that modeling was around 6,000 units, and
Yeah.
Included a few more sites, especially some that are currently in the 100-year floodplain. So we've refined into this approach. The modeling is around up to about 4,400 units, but again, it's a lot of assumption basis, type of units, size of units, how mix of the non-residential to residential in the mixed use. If there's interest in the final plan for tipping that more, we can look at additional sites. We can look at additional types of units. We can also think a little bit more about where some of those incentives might be appropriate, as far as like another floor or an additional density. But again, I think this moves the needle on jobs housing balance, obviously a lot for housing, but there's still quite a bit of job potential in East Boulder, especially beyond the life of this plan. There are a lot of underutilized properties in East Boulder that over the very long term could be redeveloped into a lot more jobs. We typically forecast, again, about a 1% growth rate in jobs. So over the term of say 15 years, this would definitely make a big dent in the jobs housing balance. Especially in East Boulder, for of that geography, since we have such a limited number of units there today. Jacques, I'm not sure if I answered that question.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably, there's probably a lot more for me to learn on that besides what we'll do tonight. But I'm just trying to get a sense, just because of the last time we did look at that, potential build out for employment and jobs was in the tens of thousands, and potential build out for housing was a quarter or less of that. And
see that
so again,
citywide.
I guess I'm wondering, you know, I always have that question, if we're gonna bring housing in these areas, I know we need the light industrial to be kept as a part of our mix,
Mhm.
but, you know, there's just a question around that and how we're doing on that, on those numbers, so.
Yeah, it's a good question for that we're asking directly of our community members right now too. And I'd love to hear your thoughts as far as
Yeah.
what we're recommending, helping that balance.
Okay. The last one I have, and you probably don't have a direct answer to this, I have a feeling it's going to be a similar thing, like as it builds out, but have you proposed, or do you have a picture in your mind of the balance of housing types between townhomes, apartments, condos, live work units, and all of that? Is there any sense of that at this point in time?
I think it was really important to the working group members to have a range of types of units. So in each of those, the colorful maps that you saw,
Yeah.
we do talk about the types of units. The Parkside East and West have the most diversity of trying to look toward that townhouse type or the live work types of units. But we'll probably be seeing more of the condo apartment types, I think, in that 55th and Arapahoe area. As far as numbers or percentages, I don't think we're quite there. Jean, would you agree or have others to add to that?
No, I think that's right.
Okay. I'll let somebody else go, then I'll come back to my others.
Great. I think Danny is queued up.
Okay. Hi guys. I just want to thank you very much. This is very helpful. I really like to see this way this thing's progressing. A few comments and I guess a few questions, but I think, you know, the whole notion when we're talking about a plan like this and we're talking about a vision, I like having that higher housing number because again, there's nothing in any sort of master plan document that's a mandate. You know, you're talking about goals and how you progress in that direction is really a question of a long period of time and you know, some good fortune, et cetera. So I like the way that you guys have that because ultimately we're talking about a transition from what is, which is kind of the old school, to something that'll be you know, more modern in terms of where the needs are for the city right now, et cetera. So I think that's all great. So I do like the whole notion of the mix of the zoning. I do like the emphasis on the housing. One of the things that I like to see, and you know, very well maybe in there, but you know, we've talked about in the past, the Housing Advisory Board has over the past few years about the notion of the role employers can and should play in overall housing solutions. You know, and I think it's really been a missing link for most communities that you see throughout the state, pretty much everywhere. And I think something like this, with the notion that the next big company that comes in, this would be an ideal place to develop some sort of campus, right? So where they're providing housing, you know, I know that there was a lot of discussion on this when I think it's one of the reasons why Amazon got the boot from New York City, from Queens particularly, where I grew up, was because of the lack of addressing that issue. But, you know, something where you say housing that's kind of integrated with the businesses really is I think, as Jacques was saying, one of the things that we talked about as a great model for here, whether that's upstairs, downstairs, you know, employee unit business on the ground level, whether that's a campus. You know, the one thing that jumps out at me, I just drove past there yesterday, and BVSD is right down the block. And they certainly have a lot of employees that can use housing closer to where they work. So I think that's something that I like to see, but overall, the vision I absolutely love. I really like the emphasis on what can we do transportation wise to really augment how this plan goes and how it really is going to accommodate the needs. I do agree with Michael. I think there are a lot of things that you can do. They're always very challenging, but I think there are things that you can do. And in master plan, it's another place where you can maybe see it, where you can kind of direct incentives towards the type of businesses that are really going to accommodate the vision that we have. And again, that's not a mandate. The hardest thing in the world to do, you know, been in land use for 25 years. The hardest thing in the world to do is to mandate commercial businesses because it just doesn't happen, right? You know, it papers or it doesn't paper. But having some sort of array in this vision, I think, of incentives both for the transition with housing, you know. So in other words, like Terry was saying, you know, to get people to move in that direction when they want to kind of maintain inertia, you know, we can lay out all the different potential incentives, and we've talked about some of them here. And again, because this is a vision plan, it's not regulation, we could throw all those out there, whether or not they're actually utilized, but it would be great to see those, to see that we're, you know, contemplating those things ahead of time, and then however it manifests, so be it. But that's one thing I'd like to see. But overall, I mean, this sets it sets the goalposts at a very good picture, and a transition that I think is really useful and can really take advantage of this area, which is frankly, I think, underutilized and is continuing in that direction now, because so many people I talk to just aren't going back to the office to the same construct that they were pre-COVID, and this being an area full of parking lots and full of office buildings, I think I love to see this, and to get ahead of the curve is really great. So I'm very supportive of it. I'll have some comments, I guess, when we put those questions back up. Yeah, I think I answered most of them, but I'll answer those questions directly, you know, when we put those up. But in terms of those questions, I support, you know, the direction this has gone, and I'm very pleased and appreciative to see it.
Great. I think Jacques had some other questions, but I want to give Juliet a chance. If she has anything to comment on.
Well, as I've said before, and I think Jen actually had her hand up again there in the box, but I'm and actually Jacques brought it up too, but the mix of housing types is really important, and making sure when we think about alleviating some of the crunch that we're seeing in certain demographic areas, that we're really focused on providing that housing type, and not as much. I mean, Terry made the point too. Economically, the high density housing and apartments and condos are probably going to make more sense to any developer that's trying to pencil this thing. But that isn't, we may need more of that, but the stuff that I see out there at 30th and Pearl that's market rate is very, very expensive. It's not going to solve the affordability problem that we're seeing. So we are a capitalist society, so we have limitations on how we can develop, but the housing type is really important to align with, that it align as much as possible with what we really need in the city, so that we can continue to have our schools open, because we've got families that have what they're looking for to in the kinds of places they want to live with their children. I don't want to lose our schools.
Thank you, Juliet.
Thanks, Juliet.
Again, I did not see your hand up, but do you have another comment before we go back to Jacques, and then I have a few?
I'm sorry, were you?
Oh,
did you say-
someone said you had that I missed your hand raised.
Well, yeah, I did. I wasn't sure if you said Jen, so I didn't want to cut.
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah, I did have a few questions, and I feel like I've missed some of this conversation. So if my question's not relevant to this, just tell me right away. I know that we are looking at like focusing on middle class housing. When I hear mixed use, I think of mixed use. So I think of middle class housing, and I also think of LMI housing, affordable housing. So, and we're talking about apartments perhaps, and townhomes, and you know, and so what I'm wondering is if there's been a discussion, like where we are at in discussion with what this type of mixed use looks like, and if there's been considerations for affordable housing ownership in this mixed use, affordable housing units, And then also, some of these units, if they were deemed to be affordable housing or even affordable ownership, what are the chances that some of those would be participating in voucher type programs?
Thanks, Jen. Very good questions, and I might look to Jay to help out too. Knowing that, you know, where we are in this type of plan, we don't have a lot of control over the affordability levels of these types of units. There's such a need in the community that I think we really want to try to emphasize within the plan, and parts of our goals of having some of the affordable units in East Boulder. But again, with the city not owning the land or controlling the projects, that's going to be much more limited. Jay, other thoughts on how to answer that?
Yeah, I can add just a little bit. So yeah, Jen, so think about the East Boulder subcommunity plan is sort of just one step below the comprehensive plan. So the comprehensive plan really doesn't get into the detail of the super specific details like you're talking about of affordable home ownership, affordable rentals, and how many, where they go. But keep in mind, everything that gets developed out here does have to adhere to the current regulations, right? So that 25% requirement for permanently affordable housing has to be met, the commercial linkage fee. So we'll be getting funds, and we'll be getting units through redevelopment in East Boulder. And I would just add, you know, the city will, and particularly Housing and Human Services, Boulder Housing Partners, we will be looking for opportunities to build projects out here as well. The challenge we've had is there weren't very many sites that were available to build housing. So a big change with this subcommunity plan is that there are going to be more opportunities for housing, period. So, and then all those details are things that get figured out later in the development process. So does that help at all?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Jay.
Oh, we got Danny again.
And I just say, Jay, for that reason, that's why I think to having the plan, an articulation of some of the incentives that might be in there, right from the get-go can be really, really helpful, because it's going to orient things in that direction. While we can't control private property, we can incentivize the type of development we want to see, and regulatory incentives can be a very powerful tool, and you know, it really starts at the master planning level. So I'd love to see that, because you know, I agree with what you're saying. I think that's a good way to, you know, hit the ground running.
Great. Jacques, did you have something else?
Yeah, just kind of housekeeping issue or question here on the 60% plan. Jean, when you were showing us the slideshow, you had close-up diagrams of the different uses, and the kind of, you broke out the different areas there. I didn't see those in the 60%. I just saw one larger map with a kind of small. Is that in the 60% and I'm missing it, or have they just not been added in yet?
It is. There's a little information in there, and you know, and we do have a description of what those are called, those different colors are called place types. It's a little
Right.
further down in there. Again, and a lot of what we're working on now and will be reflected into the final draft, will be working to really try to differentiate between those and flesh them out.
Yeah. And I guess what I was getting at was you had kind of close-ups of the stamp area and these other areas. And I only see the one map of the entire sub-community area.
Okay. Jacques, let me look, and I can.
Yeah, and if you have them, if you could send them, that'd be great, because they're really helpful.
And I would say, take a look at the executive summary from the stamp that I think you guys have the link to in your memo as well.
Yeah, and I've got it clear in here. I mean, it's nice how it's all color coded for us, so that's great. One other thing, I just had these are kind of like curiosity questions. I guess this may be for the other Jean. It's transportation related. Jean Sanson, is she still with us? Here somewhere? Okay. I just have questions on the, hey, there you are. On the mobility hubs. Is that something from a transportation standpoint? Does the chicken or the egg come first with how those are laid out versus the housing that's going to end up getting developed? In other words, do those things, if put in place first, also impact then kind of or incentivize development, you know, of housing types? So I'm just kind of curious about kind of if you can just give me a really broad overview, like what's the distance between these hubs when you talk about mobility hubs in general, like a guideline?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, Doc, to be honest. So those areas where we do have control of the right of way, for example, at bus stops or the planned bus rapid transit station, we call it a station, but the vehicles are actually going to stay on street and pick up and drop off, much like the Flatiron Flyer does today along Broadway. So those areas where we have greater control of the right of way, where we can incorporate things like long-term bike storage and even Wi-Fi at some point in time, and other types of amenities areas for Uber and Lyft pickup and drop off. Those are areas that we can start to look at as we invest in those transit systems today. I mean, one of the things we're doing right now is actually filling in gaps in the multi-use path on Arapahoe today. So we're actually in the process of trying to acquire a little bit more right of way to make even just the bus stop that's out at 55th a little more comfortable and provide more amenities for people. And that is the kind of thing that developers will look for, right? And as they see these amenities coming, then there'll be greater mixes of uses and people wanting to be in that area and to invest in that area. And so it's really leveraging that public investment. And I would say that's probably where the largest public transportation investment will happen, will be along that Arapahoe corridor. When we're talking about those other types of mobility hubs, I think of them as sort of smaller scale, like points where, so you get off the bus rapid transit and you grab, you know, an electric scooter and you take it and you drop it off at, you know, whatever location you're going to north of the Flatiron Business Park. And then you connect to a really good path that takes you straight to your building, you know, or that sort of thing. So probably smaller scale. There will also hopefully be opportunities to incorporate these into redevelopment as it happens. So one of the things that we're going to be looking at, we're hoping to look at in the coming year, is to update our parking standards. For one, they're pretty antiquated, and two, hand in hand with like things like perhaps a parking maximum, would be looking at things like a TDM ordinance to require developers to incorporate those types of amenities you'd want to see at a mobility hub. So a little bit of everything.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Great. We technically have about 8 minutes left, but I'd like to propose we let this run a little longer if need be, because it is so important. Good, that's great. So I got some comments. First of all, I think you all know I was involved through a Urban Land Institute Technical Advisory Panel that happened in 2016. And although I was not a panelist, I didn't insert my own opinion into it. This plan certainly reflects a lot of those ideas about placemaking, mixing uses, increasing walkability, adding transit. So I'm pleased to see that, certainly endorse the direction. I'm going to ask my questions one at a time. One is really about Boulder Junction, which is, I would say, fairly partway through a fairly similar transformation from strictly light industrial to mixed use. That's an area that's received a lot of criticism over the years. And I think a fair criticism now would be the lack of affordability. On the other hand, it is starting to come together as a place. And if you go walk the recent additions to Boulder Junction, you can see the connectivity coming together, the nicer streetscapes, the public spaces, and that's really an encouraging sign. And of course, a goal as well. So the question is, any lessons learned from looking at a place like Boulder Junction, or for that matter, the holiday site that you could be applying or are applying to the East Arapahoe plan? I suppose that's a question for Jean.
Right, thank you, Michael.
Yeah, go ahead, Jean.
Oh, I was gonna say, we definitely will be, we've learned a ton from what we've done in Boulder Junction, especially around the form-based code and what the outcomes from that have been. We've applied a lot of that learning to the recently adopted form-based code at Alpine Balsam as well, and used that area plan to help inform the new zoning for this. And I think that, again, as we look toward implementation, taking those learnings to apply to this plan too. Jean, did you have something more to add?
I was just going to add that, we very much are using the district model, the access management and parking district model in Boulder Junction to other areas like Alpine Balsam and eventually to the 55th and Arapahoe station area. And there's certainly lessons learned about, the mechanisms to develop those districts and put them in place. Unfortunately, Boulder Junction suffering from having a closed RTD bus station at the moment, right? So, we're very dependent on RTD for a lot of the plans and what is, what we hope to be a transit or car light community is really suffering without transit service. I don't know if there's a lesson learned there, but it's certainly something that we keep in mind as we think about the transit investments we're making in the area and looking at even alternative partnerships beyond RTD.
Okay, thank you. An implicit question that seems to be coming up again and again is where do you start this thing and how do you get it rolling in the right direction? So I'm curious to know if there's any potential catalytic site, such as maybe a small parcel of public land or a site that could be purchased, as the 30 Pearl purchase site was purchased long ago by the city, or any kind of a mechanism that could help organize development, such as a business improvement district. And I realize this isn't strictly planning, but these are the practical points of implementing such a plan. And I guess that's for Jean, either Jean, both Jeans.
You get the pair of jeans tonight. I had to sneak that in there. I don't think I think that we have a lot of opportunities with the city facilities. We have the Belmont City Park, the city municipal
Service center
and various others that, and the airport that are wonderful community amenities and city-owned sites that will be included in this plan, but we're not recommending huge changes to those areas. And as far as privately owned, there's not an identified site so much yet. Jean, you probably can speak to this more in the 55th and Arapahoe area.
I wish there was. I wish we had some ownership in that area, but at this point in time, we do not. But I would say that we have some major property owners in that area who are very vested in this process and interested in seeing the type of change that this plan envisions.
And Michael, to your point, I think several, if not all of you have mentioned incentives. So I think if what I've not heard is our necessarily recommended land use changes that we had in the discussion questions, but I would love to hear some more about your thoughts about incentives, mechanisms to, as you say, get the ball rolling that feel like they would be acceptable or that we should be considering to work into the implementation strategies.
Well, that's a big, hairy issue. I'm going to let Danny take that first.
I just throw a bunch out. We've talked in the past about the height variance incentive for affordable housing. Density incentives for affordable housing, I think, can be a really big tool. Redevelopment allowance for however that might play out. It's going to be a little tricky over there, given the predominance of uses right now and the direction we're going. I think there can be fiscal incentives. One of the things that I think, as far as I know, like over in the diagonal, right, is one of the things that's being explored over there, but I think is a really underutilized tool as well. There's a whole notion of lightly subsidized commercials. So you say, if you certain kinds of businesses, you can subsidize them, and then depending on how they do, especially if you have some sort of percentage rent structure, you can recoup some of that subsidy, but it also kind of helps direct the type of businesses that you're trying to see and get them going and get their feet off the ground. And I don't think that's too anti-capitalist to try to do things that way. I think it can be very useful. I think that's just the start of it, but I really do think that there's there could be exemptions from certain fees that go into it, though that's always a challenging Pandora's box, as Jay pointed out last month. But I think really the whole notion is list the array of incentives that have been used in the past and that might be used again, and have those in the master plan, or in the vision plan, the sub community plan, because it doesn't mean that you have to use them. It doesn't mean that anything's out there, but it kind of hangs the worm on the hook there. So a lot of developers will start looking into it when they're doing their initial due diligence and planning, if they're going to look at doing a project over there, because if it's in front of them, I think it always makes it a lot more feasible for a developer. I represent a lot of different developers, and if you put it in front of them right to begin with, rather than have them hope for something, it's going to really increase the likelihood that you'll see it implemented, rather than them coming up with the do good incentives themselves. So
Yeah, I like Danny's idea of just maybe putting the laundry list in the plan if that's feasible. And, you're not just think about incentives and carrots and sticks, right? The developers can, and property owners can participate in ways that cost them something, and they can get something back for doing the right thing. That's a much bigger discussion, but I think a lot of people on this call are familiar with some of these techniques. Other comments about Gene Goss's question in particular? Okay, I have a couple more questions. Interesting to see this such a fluid situation with this potential of Apple coming in and bring many, many jobs into Flatiron Park, which I guess could potentially lead to the sale of Flatiron Park. So I'm sure this is all a moving target, with the potential for rising costs around that as well. Let's see, I really like the transportation aspects, and question for Gene Sanson, or both of you, is has this been presented to TAB, and what kind of reaction do you get from them?
It has been presented to TAB. I think they've challenged us to include even more connections, which are reflected in this in the plan, the connections plan that I shared with you. And Gene, you can reflect on what you heard from TAB as well. It's almost like we can't get there fast enough in terms of the types of transportation changes that we're looking to see in this area.
I would agree, Jean. And I think we had we've had two really good sessions that combine both the TAB and the planning board together, because the transportation improvements support the land use, and the land use supports the transportation improvements, and had really good feedback from both around those. I think there were, again, questions similar to that Jacques raised around jobs, housing balance, and what these recommendations, I just, wanting to clarify what these recommendations will do. And I think to that point, outlining the need for that critical mass to be able to support a lot of the transportation improvements and help make them more viable. So important to think about the nuances of the character and the balance as we move forward.
And I would just, to piggyback on that, one other thought I had about our conversation with the Transportation Advisory Board is they've really challenged us to make a more explicit link between our climate commitment and these land use and transportation changes. And so one of the things that we're working on right now with our climate folks is using streetlight data, which is Bluetooth data that we use to determine volumes of traffic and where people are traveling to and from, sort of their origin and destination, to understand what travel looks like today based on the amount of square footage of different types of uses and the population and employment in the area, and then forecasting what those changes to vehicle miles traveled and therefore greenhouse gas emissions could be as we develop East Boulder into more of a 15-minute neighborhood area. So we'll be sharing that information as it becomes available. We're still in the midst of doing that technical analysis, but it's an important question to ask and to be able to confirm that we can forecast positive change with these land use and transportation investments.
Great. And I have one more question, and which is, what would you like our board to do regarding this other than comment at the moment?
I'm sorry, around.
What are you asking our board for other than comment at this point? Anything else?
I think it's been really wonderful comments, and that's what we were looking for.
Okay. Danny.
Do you want directed answers to those 3 questions? We can give it a try. I know that was a little challenging before, but maybe.
Sure, I think that I think you all have covered several of them pretty well, but let's circle back because that makes sense to
Because I forgot what they are.
more specifically. So the first one was really about supporting the approach for new housing and mixed use in the East Boulder subcommunity or the 55th and Arapahoe Station area. And I think we heard that there's a lot of support for what we've proposed, but would love to hear if there's any nuance to that you all would like to add. Feedback about the balance of uses in the recommended land use plan, or any suggested changes.
I'll start and I'll be brief. Number 1, yes, support the direction. 2, feedback. I think you got some of that in general discussion, but I'll add, I'd love to see some element of, and I don't know how you put this in a plan, but job preservation, because a lot of those light industrial, very practical uses are parked, so to speak, at 55th and Arapahoe. I would hate to see those businesses just go away and be replaced by something else. Is there some way of incorporating a percentage of them or most of them into a future mixed use area? That would be a positive. I don't have a comment on number 3. Someone else? Any again? You're muted, Dan.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I replicate Michael's comments, and the only other thing I throw in there is, as I was saying before, I love to see incentives articulated a little bit more, so we have that as part of the kind of action plan moving forward on this. But outside of that, very positive feedback. I do support it, and outside of that one comment, I think it's going in the right direction. I like setting the goals high and then trying to get there. So
Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. Did I miss another raised hand? There's one, Jacques.
I'll go. Yeah, definitely, support this overall approach. The balance of land uses, again, I'm just looking to, I think, shift it even farther into the housing direction if possible. And suggested changes to land use. One of the things I'm just looking, as I look at the mapping and I look at the flood zones, there are pieces of property that the city of Boulder owns. And I know that they are parks related at the moment, but we have a massive area of park there. And I don't question whether, for instance, the zone that's in the 500 year, just to the east of Boulder Lumber, is not some land that maybe could be re-engaged with and looked at. No dissing to the disc golfers. I love disc golfers, but a few posts out there are great, but maybe that could be realigned into some of that space anyway. And then the other one is the west portion of Sterling at the dead end of Sterling Court, which is directly on the east side of that Valmont Park zone. I guess, again, I question there just the balance of uses in the area in general. And if we couldn't carve out, as with careful look at the floodplain issues, those are two that pop out at me as possible spaces where we could add a significant chunk of land and are owned by the city of Boulder currently. That's it.
Thanks, Chuck.
Any other comments or responses to the three questions? Okay, thanks for giving that a little extra time. It's well worth it. It's an important issue, but I think we can thank the Jeans and move on to the next agenda item. There's Juliet and Jay.
I was just waving goodbye to the pair of jeans. I love that. So
You
good.
beat me to it. I was saying thanks, pair of jeans.
That was so good.
That's great. I keep on getting background light confused with raised hand, so a lot of that going on. Jay,
Thank you all so much for a good conversation. Much
thank
appreciated.
you.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good evening.
Jay, did you have something you want to say?
I was just going to recommend that we move up the letter to council, since that's the most pressing issue. And that needs to be completed at this meeting.
Okay. I just sent it out. I apologize. I really thought I had sent it, but it is very brief. And if folks had a chance to look at it, it won't take long.
Does everyone?
I sent the wrong one out, darn.
Oh, there it is.
No, there it is.
I got it.
Okay, yeah, this looks like the latest one, 11.2. Got it down to a page. Council requested we focus on one issue. And that's what I tried to do.
Oh, there it is.
Michael, we just want to comment on it, or?
Yes, that would be a good start. And
I have two comments, if I may.
sure.
The second paragraph, we talked about middle class that can no longer afford to buy or rent here. I think middle class affording to buy here is correct. Renting here, I don't know. I think that there are a lot of rental options for people, even the middle class. I don't know that we necessarily need to take it out, but I just want to point out that I think renting housing in Boulder is, I think, more affordable than a lot of people think, given the income levels of the people that live around here. So I don't know when you take it out, but I just want to point out that I think that buying here is tough, renting here is a lot easier. And then coming down to the 4 bullet points, hosting additional listening sessions are good, collaborate with other boards. I don't know if we've ever collaborated. I think other boards have talked to us and made presentations and whatnot. And I don't know of any white papers we've done, but if we want to start doing that, I guess that's possible. But I like the fourth one, propose initiatives of support and expand middle income housing. So in short, the rental middle income housing, I don't know that I totally agree with that. The collaborate with other boards, I guess that's kind of a nice feel good statement. White papers, I don't know if we're doing any of that. And that's about it. Otherwise, I think it's great. I really like the brevity of it. And I like focusing on middle income because I think that's a big part of what we need.
Okay, I apologize. I had to turn off my camera because of an unstable internet. Those are good comments. I think
Well, the
there's,
picture actually looks really good, man. It's kind of nice.
yeah, probably a good question you raise is, I don't want to get into a huge debate about it, but you know, is there a missing metal for rental, or is that covered? Is that something that's safe to not mention or take out?
I'm not passionate about taking it out. I just wanted to note that there's a lot of rental opportunities here that aren't ridiculous, crazy, astronomical expensive like buying is. So I don't know that we need to take it out, but I just wanted to comment on it.
Okay. As far as working with other boards, that did come up in the last meeting, the potential to do something in planning board, but collaborate might be bombastic. There could be just a better word there. You know, we've kind of gone back and forth on the white papers thing because that's a difficult assignment for a group of volunteers to really get right. I'm open to more discussion on any of these. This is a draft. Jock's got his hand up.
Hold on. Yeah, I was just going to say, I think in general, I like the kind of brevity and the focus on the middle income, as we had discussed. I think it's the right thing to do here. I kind of, I like keeping the rent piece in there, a little bit contrast to Terry. I know that I've looked at renting and I definitely fall at the upper end of the middle income. And it's hard to find something actually that, you know, I mean, yeah, there's stuff to find, but the variety and the, you know, the quality is pretty rough along those lines sometimes, especially for a family. So I would be happy to see that stay in there. And I think that, you know, the pieces that you have down there, the hosting, the additional the listening sessions, the collaboration with other boards. I know that's kind of a broad, wide open piece, but, and again, I don't know if the term collaborate's quite the right one, but I would hope that we would start to engage more in our public process here, where boards can work together, where there's significant crossover, you know, planning, tab, have. So I think I'd like to see that in there, exactly how it would look.
Maybe engage is a better word, a little bit less committal.
Yeah.
Maybe so. Yeah. Yeah. And then, you know, yeah, I could barely get out 2 pages on the mobile ADUs over 6 months or whatever it was. So yeah, the researching and producing white papers is challenging, but I do think that it, in a way, you know, I would like to see us start to put more on the plate, so to speak, to be considered, even if that's just within, you know, the board structure itself and never moves beyond it. But so I like the energy of that. Otherwise, that's all the comments I have.
Andy, do you have an additional comment? You have your hand up.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Oh, now you're muted.
Okay, I said there's that adage, brevity is the soul of wit, and thought the letter was great. You wrapped quite a bit of important parts into the one page, and so from that, the whole structure is terrific. You know, I do know where Terry's coming from about the distinction between buying and renting, and it's absolutely true. I think one of the things I know Jacques talked about a lot in the past is not just buy or rent, but stay here. So maybe if we throw that in there too, because that is part of middle income, you know, we're talking about the ADUs and stuff like that. It absolutely is as well. So maybe buy, rent, or stay here or maintain a home here or something like that. But outside of that, I thought it was great. I think engage is much better than collaborate because it just, you know, kind of indicates what we did talk about last month. I agree that maybe taking out the white papers and maybe change that with provide written recommendations to council. Maybe that's a better way to go about it. Jay, maybe your input would be really helpful there, but I think instead of saying a white paper, because that doesn't really say who it's going to, just say provide written recommendations to council or something like that. And outside of that, I think it's great. It's to the point, and it sticks to the one main issue, and then just talks about some of the tools that we want to use. So I'm supportive of it. You know, I think some of those little modest changes can help, and I think it's ready to go.
Great. We do have some language in there about people putting down roots. You're suggesting strengthening that or being more explicit?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I guess just the whole notion that, you know, I defer to Jacques on this, but the whole notion that, you know, it's not just hard to get a house here, but then for a lot of people, it's hard to be able to stay here as you need more room or just, you know, affording it day to day, whatever it may be. But that's just the one thing I just wanted to bring that up and throw it out on the floor, because I know that's one of the things that we've talked about is absolutely a factor for middle income housing particularly.
That's a really good point. Other comments? Jay?
Can you guys see my editing? Am I sharing my screen properly?
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, I see it.
Okay. No?
Yeah,
Yes.
I see it. Yes.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Okay. I was just wanted you to know that I am trying to capture what you're saying so that we can finalize it tonight. But the one thing I did want to bring up, so I think it's important to be clear about missing middle versus middle income. So the way that everybody's been talking tonight has been focused on middle income and not missing middle housing. So I just want to be clear if you want to lead with missing middle housing or not.
Jay, could you give us the technical distinction so we make sure we're on the right path?
Sure. So missing middle is a housing type, right? So what we've been talking about with townhomes that theoretically should be more affordable. The problem is in Boulder, even missing middle housing types are not affordable to middle income households. So the challenge we have in Boulder is that middle income households are the ones that are getting squeezed out, right? So they're getting replaced by higher income households. And the challenge that we often hear the most is that when people who are renting in Boulder, when they look to purchase a home, that's when they run into difficulty, and they find that they can get much more product, larger yard or a yard, and larger home for a much lower price in outside communities. And so you have to really want to live in Boulder to accept that trade-off. Anyway, so does that help in terms of the distinction? So the city has been focused, we have a middle income housing strategy. We don't have a missing middle housing strategy.
That is helpful.
Avoid using the word class.
Say okay to remove the reference to rental. Jay, I know we need to wrap this up, but what's the best way to do that, given that we're editing on the fly?
That's fine. I mean, as long as you all agree to the language changes, I can just clean it up and then you can sign it.
So it's okay to review it, passing it around the email horn, and
No, I mean, you have to vote on a version tonight.
we have to vote on a version. That makes sense.
I think, how about that language for the, if we say it can no longer afford to purchase or remain in housing here. That way it's kind of. So put purchase in front, purchase or remain in housing here.
I change class to income. I don't think you want to be talking about or start class warfare.
Let's not have class warfare. Good idea. I lose. Okay, given Jay's direction here, love to hear any edits, additions, changes, so we can get to a vote on this.
So what do you suggest, Jay, that we change missing middle to
Middle income.
middle income housing?
I don't know,
I thought your point was we.
I like
don't
missing
change it
middle
to-
housing. I like missing middle housing because even though our missing middle is still more expensive than what one might think it is, it's still what we're missing.
Right, I thought Jay's point was we want to use missing middle and don't use middle income.
Yeah,
I mean, you could say both. I mean, I think, to me, like you just said, Terry, missing middle implies that it's somehow going to be affordable to middle income.
And your point being that's a term that the city's been using that will resonate with council.
exactly.
You good with that thought, Juliet?
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to make sure I understood what Jay was
No, that's great.
suggesting to us, yeah. With respect to the bullet points, by the way, Michael, thank you for putting this together. It's really nicely done and succinct. On the bullet points, I would say sort of a foregone conclusion that we would research a recommendation made to council. So I don't know that we need that as a bullet point, because if we're going to propose something, I think the expectation would be that we're proposing it based on research that we've done.
Mhm.
So
you're proposing deleting bullet point 3, or perhaps they can
Yeah.
combine with bullet point 4. I mean, they know we're going to research it, so I guess we don't.
yeah, I don't think it's necessary. I think
Make
it's
it up.
sort of, it would be an expectation, a basic expectation that we wouldn't propose something unless we had
Right.
researched it. So for the sake of brevity, I would just say delete that one.
I'm good with that.
Any objections?
Oh, fix it.
Go on.
I think
And-
we're good.
With respect to engaging with other boards, maybe it's informing ourselves of what other boards are working on and engaging with them as appropriate. But maybe that's adding more words when we just tried to delete some. So I'm fine with that too, leaving it
Yeah.
as.
I think we talked about this a little bit at the last meeting, and it's non-committal enough that it doesn't get us in a corner, but it also suggests some action we might take that we have not previously taken. So I like it. the way it is.
Cool.
Okay,
I'd like to make a motion to move, I move to send this letter to council.
Danny has seconded it.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye and raise your hand.
I
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Aye.
Can I just
Mike,
clarify?
I like this letter a lot. I think it's the best one we've seen.
Thanks. I'm going back to writing for a living, so that's a good sign.
Can I just clarify
thank
that you
you
guys
all.
are, sorry, can I just clarify that you guys are okay with me adding middle income to missing middle
Yeah,
written in?
Yep.
I am.
All right, so I will put this on the fancy HAB letterhead. I'll get Michael to sign it. We'll submit it and circulate it to the group.
Great. Well, that is a significant action. Thank you, board. And in the same vein, we're going to move on to the mobile ADU draft. It's not really a white paper. Well, I guess it is. It's more of a recommendation. Jacques in particular has put a lot of time and energy in this. And I think we have a good proposal and something else we could vote on tonight and move off our work plan for 2021. So maybe we can get that up as a share screen and make some comments on it, and love to hear everyone's input.
Jay, can you put that up from your side?
Yep, give me a minute.
Yep, no worries. And while you're doing that, I'll just jump in and just say, also got, thanks for the whole board for considering this, and Danny and Michael and Jay for helping me kind of put together this last piece. You guys had helpful edits, and they all kind of were along the same vein. I'm not going back to writing for making a living. That was 20 years ago, and I think I don't think it's coming back.
Yeah, so Jacques, I don't have your Word document. I only have the PDF.
Oh, okay, let me, I thought I sent the Word to you after I sent the PDF, but I should be able to pull it up here. Give me a second. Let's see, there it is. All right, can I share screen?
Yes, you should be able to.
Yep, okay. All right, are you guys seeing
There you
that?
go.
Sorry, it comes up with the flood mapping in the background there.
Mhm.
Is that visible to everybody?
You can make it a little bigger, make it wider,
Make it wider, yep.
fill your
See.
screen.
Hold on. Whoa.
Quick question. Did everyone receive this before tonight's meeting?
I unfortunately sent it out only a few hours before the meeting. So I don't know if everybody got a chance to look at it or not. But basically on kind of Jay's guidance, I really focus this mostly on the concept of what we're trying to do, and in general, the benefits that I perceive from doing this, if we can take this action. And then I think, the likelihood is that if, as we get around to, and Jay, you can help me out with this here, but as we get around to the ADU, what's that called, Jay? Update? Evaluation. There are going to be a number of potential changes to the ordinance that might be suggested through that evaluation, and that might be a a good time to put this in the hopper with that. As Jay mentioned, and as we know, this one, of course, will require action from council and public participation, and that whole process, of course. Some of those other things that come up through the update or the evaluation may not. But nonetheless, it seems like these should probably piggyback together in some manner. So it seems like it's kind of good timing with that evaluation. Hopefully, Jay, coming up this next year. And do you guys want, how would you like to proceed with this? Do you want me to just scroll down through it so you can read, or is there anybody who hasn't had a chance to read it yet and wants to take time now to do that? I'm going to take that as a yes, we want to do that from all the eyes. I will slowly. Good to keep going. I'll fix that alignment so that we're not. Here, I just tried to touch on kind of the regulatory structure of it a little bit. Without getting into too much detail. And this last bit is just kind of a quick assessment of the flexibility kind of and the options in, and this was one of Jen's questions regarding, how many different ways these can be beneficial. Owners can have just a pad and a unit, the size, the flexibility of keeping it on your property or not, if you decide you don't want it there anymore, or having somebody put one there or not. And, yeah. And then just some of Danny's contribution to the verbiage and some pictures that I put in. And all of these are just FYI. The reason I put these pictures of units in, one is they show some different styles, and architectural kind of can join in with different properties that are there, but also these are all units that are on wheels. So these are all mobile units and you can kind of tell that by, it's hard to see in this picture, but you can see how far the siding goes down below there. You can see the skirting around here, obvious skirting there. And this one, although the pad drops down into the hill a little bit, so you can't really tell, but that was just where a pad was created with a little elevation change so that it could kind of cheat up to grade, so to speak. So, there's a lot of flexibility in how you can skirt these things and fit them into the environment, not have them look like an RV or an Airstream trailer. And I don't know if we want this or not, Jay, and I just put this link here. There was an interesting article that was recently in CNN Business just around tiny homes in general. And it talks about some of the things that I think both Jen and Juliet were kind of leaning into a little bit, which is, what does this market look like for tiny homes and what's happening? And they are all, the sales numbers are increasing significantly. The number of people who are adopting these are increasing significantly. The number of manufacturers are increasing in parallel with that. So, it's definitely a growing little market out there for tiny homes, both for new and resale. Anyway, so that's that. Does anybody have any questions about this or comments? Danny?
I just say that the pictures are so compelling because we've had conversations in the past about, well, is this like a mobile home? Is this like an RV? You addressed it. It's one thing to address it with words, but those pictures are so compelling about how visually aesthetic these could be. So I think it's great, a great kind of closing element of the white paper or whatever we're going to call it. But yeah, I think it's great, and I'm supportive of this. I'm glad to see this come to this step, and yeah, I'm ready to roll with it if everybody else is.
Yeah, and
Go ahead.
just a real quick note on those pictures. Two of those in particular I looked at, and price-wise, they're like right in the ballpark. At first I thought, oh, those might be really expensive ones, but they're in that 40 to 50 kind of K ballpark for good looking units like that. So it's it's doable. Jen?
Yeah, so the photos that are featured at the end there show some really nice tiny homes. Is that the standard? Are we establishing a standard of what we want tiny homes to be? Or are we also going to include like potential RVs? I mean, is there a specific aesthetic, I guess, we're looking for, or is this just anything that could be considered an ADU on a wheel?
So this specifically, and I think we mentioned it in here somewhere, that these are specifically not RVs. These are manufactured homes that are on a trailer foundation. So, I have kind of the same feeling with that you're getting at there also when I put these pictures in there, because obviously not all of them are going to look like this, and I picked pictures of nice ones. But I think for the purpose of this, the concept there is to show that they can be. And again, we can't account for taste very much. We try a little bit, but we can't really account for taste and the aesthetic of something. So, what these will end up looking like is going to be just as wide as what any house will look like in Boulder, as far as, the aesthetic and the style of it from an architectural perspective. I think the main thing that we're trying to show there is that they can be integrated in, and I think the real big piece of that is just the skirting, just to show that these don't with the skirting, which I think is a piece of the puzzle that will definitely be in place if we were to do this. That's what they look like, that you're not looking at the undercarriage of the trailer. And I think that's the main reason to put them in there. But also, I think a lot of people don't have a sense of what that looks like. And as Danny says, I think that at the end of the day, it gives you a sense of possibility. So,
I just one more thing. And so I might be a bit naive with this, but do tiny homes have years like the 2021 like models? I mean, is that if they do, would that be something that could be integrated into this, where maybe there was some type of a, I don't know, I don't want to call it a standard, but putting some type of limitation in. So, I mean, you want to put something into a community that's going to beautify it too. And so that's my concern.
My understanding, and I'll ask Jacques to scroll, is that this does explicitly exclude RVs, and yet these potentially, handsome structures are also, they can be picked up and moved if someone owns one and needs to find another spot for it. Go ahead, Danny.
And I just want to stress, we've talked about this in the past, but this isn't a regulatory structure. This is just catalyzing something that then will go to staff. They're going to put together a whole set of guidance and regulations and design guidelines, I'm sure, regarding these, and it's going to blend into what's already there with ADUs. So this is just kind of laying out, some of the precepts as to why we think it's good to go that route and to make that effort, because, obviously staff time is pretty limited, but this is really just starting that. So Jennifer, a lot of those issues will invariably come up in very fine detail during the process of turning this into a regulatory structure. And I think a lot of it's probably there with the ADU policies already. So this is just getting started on this. And I just want to stress that for everybody. We've talked about it before. These aren't regulations. And I think one of the reasons why we had Jacques put together the white paper, or whatever we're going to call it, is because we didn't want to conflate this with the notion that we were drafting regulations, which there was some of that confusion just from the way the other one was laid out and the attachment of the Los Angeles regs to the back of that. So I think a lot of those questions can and will be answered, and probably not by us, but I just want to stress that for everybody, that I think, we're just getting started on this. And that's why I think this is good, because it's not talking about all that. That's really policy issues for staff and city council, I would say.
Right. And if you look at that last sentence of the first paragraph, you can see the explicit language about RVs and mobile homes.
Yeah, just right here. Yeah, I think that, that is, again, an important piece. This is something that we're proposing to council that's worth looking at, and basically asking them to say, okay, yeah, let's look at it, or they'll say, no, we don't think we're going to do that. And, council will either take it up or not.
Mhm.
But as I said, that will, and as Danny said, that will be a whole process, public engagement process that's going to, occur along with any change of this type.
Great. We had two comments from our guests I think are worth mentioning. One is, okay, Jay has responded to one of them. I was kind of regarding that as a technical question from Len about whether this is even legal, if I'm understanding it correctly.
I'm not seeing that question. What was it?
It was in chat.
Oh, yeah, I don't have access. Do I have access to my chat now? Because I'm sharing screen. I got to find out where my chat went.
Yeah.
So we're not supposed to be using chat. So, I mean, if you want to ask people in the audience if they have questions, you're welcome to do that, but let's not use the chat in that way.
Yeah, Michael, I think that would be better. That would be better, Michael, if we could.
I'm sorry, that should be a live question. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Well, what I've instructed both Mark and Lynn is if they want to communicate with the board, they send you an email. The chat function is only for asking technical questions about Zoom if someone's having difficulty.
Oh, I see. I see.
So it's very distracting the meeting to have people.
Got it. Okay, I withdraw that suggestion then and ask for other comments on this document.
do you guys, can I take the document down now, or do you guys want to still have me have it up there? Shared. Anybody want me to keep it up? I will pull it down otherwise.
I'm okay with pulling it down, but whatever others think.
Going, gone. Okay.
Okay. Well, we could discuss this more, or we could ask for a motion.
Well,
Dan.
I would, can I make the motion on this, or does somebody
Yeah.
else need to? Okay, well, I would make a motion that we approve this recommendation for mobile accessory dwelling units as recommendation to council to put on the work plan for 2020. I'm sorry, what is it, 2022? Let me catch up. I'm just a little behind.
I think we're actually trying to sneak it into 2021, but
So again, I'll make I move that we recommend this mobile accessory dwelling unit change to the ADU ordinance and put it on their work plan for 2022.
A second.
okay, we have a motion. All in favor? Aye.
All right.
Aye.
I think I see. Against? Okay, I counted 4 and 1. Do we have an abstention?
Me.
Okay.
Did you need to ask, Michael? You can see it on his face.
He looks pained. Oh my gosh.
I just came in.
Where the motion has carried.
And everything, and I just don't know. But send it off. We passed it.
We passed it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Jacques.
Okay, the item number C, item letter C, and I matters from the board is middle income next steps. I think we need to modify that language to maybe missing middle income next steps. I guess that's an open discussion about what we might want to do, since we're putting that as numero uno on our work plan for 2022, or actually asking the council to do so for 2022, 2023. We could discuss some ideas that have come up in recent past, or having a listening session, for example, but I'm going to open that up to the entire board. Danny.
I kind of think at this juncture, maybe that's something better for us to wrestle with in January. We have a feel for what direction we're going in terms of live meetings or Zoom meetings and some other, policy matters here and stuff like that. I think January could probably be best utilized to be a scoping meeting for the whole year to try to, hit the ground running with that stuff. But I think that, the kind of context that we'd have then would probably be the best time to wrestle with a lot of that. I think now it would just kind of be stuff that might, assuming we don't have a December meeting, which is the next thing, but it might be lost by the wayside a little bit by the time we get back in January anyhow. So I'd probably say this would be a good thing to bump to January. Would just be my thought.
I think we are going to have a December meeting, but that's a topic coming up. So that's basically a plea for tabling it for now. Other thoughts?
I would agree. I think it's probably worth tabling for now and, waiting until January and seeing what the field looks like.
I agree with Jacques and Danny on that.
A lot of people with turkey and Thanksgiving on their minds, but nothing wrong with that. Jen, did you have a comment?
No, I agree with everyone.
Okay. So we'll put it out there for potential agenda item for December if we have a December meeting, or January. Gosh, this is not on the agenda, but would you mind, maybe Jay would be okay of putting this under matters for staff? I'd love to have a little debrief on the equitable housing symposium that was held last week. That Jay and staff had a lot to do with organizing. We had a really interesting panel. I don't have a great sense of the attendance. It was clearly more Zooming than live, but it was technically sold out. Is that okay with you, Jay?
Yeah, we could definitely do that next meeting. I added it to my list.
Oh, okay. I was saying, can we do it now because it's fresh?
Absolutely. Yeah, we have time.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Who attended? Okay, well.
Listen.
Kind of discussion I like. Well, I'll give you some feedback. I thought it was a good session. It was, you all heard the Clay Fong, or I think most of you heard the Clay Fong presentation on the history of racism in Boulder real estate, and he did a repeat command performance of that. The highlight for me was having the president of the Minneapolis City Council speak about their zoning reforms. And she was just wonderfully pragmatic and tough, and also had a lot of good insights about ways of engaging the private sector to build more housing, using those carrots and those sticks. I personally thought it overall could have been a little more solutions oriented. There was a lot of information about the problems, and maybe there could have been more solutions. But were you able to zoom in from the West Coast, Jay?
Oh yeah, no, I was running the Zoom meeting where we did the translation, and I was the one funneling the questions from online to the moderator. Yeah, no, I would highly recommend everybody watch it. I mean,
That's great. It's recorded.
It's recorded. If you go to that link, I mean, I would watch the full 3 hours, because I think there's very good information to be shared. And the intent really wasn't to focus on solutions. It was to really start the conversation, a broader community conversation. And I think, there's a good article in the Daily Camera the next day. And I think it's gotten some people's attention. And I think, a lot of the feedback we got, particularly from, our community of color, is excitement that this issue is acknowledged, and that the city is willing to have this conversation and willing to potentially do something about it. So anyway, I would encourage you to watch it. It's well worth the time.
All right, well, I'm going to make that a homework assignment for HAB board members. And Jay, if you would put it on the agenda, and maybe we can discuss it at greater length next month, which I think gets us to matters from the staff. Happy to see we're a little ahead of schedule. And I guess we'll have a discussion about the December meeting as well. What have you got, Jay?
Yeah, I'm going to suggest framing the discussion about the Housing Equity Symposium as what's HAB's role in sort of the next steps. How does that sound? Okay, so moving on. So I put the December meeting in there. Traditionally, I can't remember the last time Hab had a December meeting. It's just a challenging time of year. Everybody's busy. We usually get pretty poor attendance. The one year that we did have it, we don't have a significant agenda. Actually, I don't have any agenda items other than, well, no, you guys wanted to talk about middle income next steps in January, because there is a chance council is toying with the idea of going back in person. I think they had a discussion last night, actually, but I don't know the outcome yet, but I'll let you know. So the question for the board is, do you want to have a December meeting, or do you want to take a break for the holidays?
I take that as a yes.
You just need a motion and vote on it.
I would do it, but I'm not going to pressure anyone else to if they think it's too busy a time of year.
If that was a motion, I'll second it.
It's like a really passive motion.
I could go either way, so
If that was the second, I'll third it.
I'm not even sure what I motioned.
I think Michael was motioning to have a meeting.
Okay,
I need to know what the agenda items are going to be if you want to move forward with the meeting.
let me be more explicit. Like I said, I personally would attend a meeting. But I want to hear from folks if they think it'll be valuable or burdensome before we vote on it.
Jay, can we meet in person at the Rio? Is that an option?
You absolutely can. That's called canceling the meeting and meeting at the Rio.
No, but we can't have more than two people.
Yeah.
Can all of us go to the
I
Rio?
would be
Recorded?
hugely in favor of that.
As long as it's accidental and we all end up there
That's
accidentally.
right. That's right. Yeah, what are you doing here?
Just notice it.
Because I'd be into that in December after this year and last year.
Well, if we do that, I'll buy everyone around anyway.
No problem. I'll buy all the drinks. Just let's
I second that motion.
I mean,
however it works.
I mean,
I like that idea.
I think it's a great idea. Let's make a public notice. Let's go somewhere that's a little more open than the Rio, like a Raybacks.
Yeah. Yes.
And if people want to come and they want to talk to us and we can get feedback from people, or we'll just talk to each other.
That sounds great.
Kind of an open meeting. I think it's a great idea.
Do we
A
actually
holiday
need to-
housing meeting.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Need to post
I'm down with that.
I'm fully vaccinated. I don't know if that matters, but announce that and let's have open discussion with no agenda.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, December 15th, should we do it earlier? I mean, it'll be cold.
It's 20 degrees tonight. It's gonna be
It'll
cold.
be 5.
Yeah.
You could change it from, whatever time you want. I mean, it could be 4 to 6. Happy hour.
I need to look at my calendar. now
You
that-
could limit it to 2 hours. I would recommend calling it a retreat. And just say where you're going to be and say it's open.
Keep it December 15th because I have it blocked off. Everybody else does.
Yeah.
Move it up a little bit to 4 o'clock and, see what happens.
Yeah.
I'd say move it up. I'd say move it up a little bit. And I would also just suggest that, we can be fluid in it. If, we don't have to, everybody be punctual or everybody stay the whole time, but, we just have that blocked out. And, call it it's our listening session for the year, so to speak. if anybody wants to come.
Right. All right, I motion that we meet at Raybacks on Wednesday, December 15th, from 4 to 5:30, with no agenda.
Second.
God,
Not to be a wet blanket, but I need to make sure that that's kosher.
Yeah.
Okay, Dad. I know we keep the car keys. Okay, we had a second, so we got to vote. All in
Peter, you
favor?
coming?
Yeah, I was gonna make a comment. On the 15th of December, I should be in Puerto Rico, so I will be with you guys in spirit, but in a much better, warmer place.
You can zoom in, Lupita.
I can zoom
You have to have a drink though.
I'd like to suggest a friendly amendment
Yeah.
that we move the December 15th meeting to Puerto Rico.
Oh, come
Second.
on over. I don't know exactly when I'm gonna be there, but I know when I'm gonna be the week before there, but that day I have to find a place. I'm gonna be at work, but yeah, that'll be fun.
Yeah,
No.
retreat for sure. Thank you for that friendly amendment, Jack. I think we'll vote on the first motion.
Yeah, rejected.
I love the idea. All in favor of meeting at Rayback at 4 p.m. on December 15th? No agenda.
Aye.
All right. No unhappy faces on that one. That's good. Back to the agenda. Let's see. Done. Anyone have anything to debrief from our meeting? We actually got a lot done and had a fantastic presentation on a big topic. Comments?
I think it's good.
Do we want to do a calendar check for January?
Oh, yeah. Should. Uh, 19th, 26th, what do we do? Third, fourth week?
Fourth,
God, it's not on my calendar.
26th.
26th?
Yep.
Okay,
I think Corey needs to get him into your calendars for next year.
great.
Yeah.
I'll remind her to do that.
Cool.
Okay.
So what I have on the agenda for January, middle income, missing middle next steps, and the housing equity symposium, next steps as well, Habs role. We had talked about doing Boulder Valley School District presentation on school enrollment. There was interest in that topic. I can try to get my contact to show up for January or February if you have a preference. I saw some heads nodding there. I'm happy to arrange that. Other things that have been listed, CHAFA, the entitlement process, getting a better understanding of that. Occupancy is another big topic that I think is going to come around again. And then what else? I think that's about it. So any preferences, thoughts, any additions?
I like them all.
I like the BVSD, the school piece. It'd be interesting to wrap our heads around that. And yeah, I mean, depending what we hear here in the next month, the occupancy piece I think is also valuable.
Okay, I'll work on that. Danny?
Yeah, I agree. I think maybe BVSD in January and occupancy in February, or even vice versa, but it sounds like BVSD is more teed up, and go from there.
Jay, if we were to do down the road a learning session on entitlements, how do you see that rolling out? Be a staff person leading that, or a developer who's gone through an entitlement process? What do you think?
It's specific to CHAFA, so this is before your time.
Oh, I see.
There was a lot of concern about the timing of tax credit deals, and it's actually changed. So I'm not sure it's that relevant anymore. And Ian Swallow covered it a little bit in his presentation last year.
Right.
So it used to be, like BHP would go after tax credits and get awarded tax credits for a certain density and certain number of units. And so when they would go through the entitlement process, they would basically say, well, if you change the number of units, then we're not going to be able to get our funding. And so now they go through the entitlement process first and then go after their tax credit financing, just to avoid that dynamic. So I'm not sure, but I mean, it's still interesting to know more about it, but we would have someone from CHAFA come and talk about how they fund affordable housing projects. I guess that's the way I was thinking about it.
Yeah. Interesting, but it doesn't sound like it's front of the stove for now.
There's a reason it's been on the work plan for 2.5 years.
Yeah. I think we'd have time to have the BBSD presentation.
Yeah, it all depends on their availability.
Right, I see. Any other calendar topics or debriefs from the meeting?
Or anything else going on at the city you want to know more about?
Well, you think the new council will take up bedrooms on their own as legislation?
My crystal ball is really hazy right now.
Yeah. Nothing else, I might ask for a motion to adjourn. Danny has motioned. Do I have a second? Jen was doing something with her hand. Jacques second. All in favor of adjourning and wishing each other happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Okay, thank you all. Good meeting.
Thanks.
Good job,
everybody.
everybody.
You travel
Good
well.
night, everybody.
Bye now.
Looking forward to December.
Yeah,
Yep.
so see you next month in person.
Yes. See you guys.
Ciao.
Yeah.